The Bellevue Logistics Warehouse woke up with the first rays of sunlight. Tall metal racks stretched toward the ceiling, creating a maze of boxes, pallets, and industrial equipment. Amidst this realm of goods and invoices moved Nigel Thornton, a 32-year-old man with tired eyes and calloused hands. "Hey, Nigel!" called Ray Parker, the warehouse manager, a massive man with graying temples. "We need to unload the truck with auto parts. They brought the wrong stuff again." Nigel nodded, wiping sweat from his forehead. He had been working at this warehouse for 6 years, and every day was like the one before. Up at 5 in the morning, a quick breakfast, an 8-hour shift among cardboard boxes and metal shelves. His salary of $2,000 a month barely covered the rent for his apartment in an old neighborhood of Bellevue, utilities, and modest meals. "Ray, have you ever thought about changing your life?" Nigel asked, dragging a heavy box. "At my age? It's too late to dream, buddy. You're still young, although..." Ray fell silent, studying his friend's face. "You're sad about something again. What's wrong?" Nigel shrugged. How could he explain the feeling of emptiness that had been haunting him for the last few months? How could he tell him that every night he returned to his one-room apartment and felt like a complete failure? At 32, he had no family, no career, no prospects. Just a job at a warehouse and a modest savings account with $300. Nothing special, he lied, just tired. After his shift, Nigel decided to stop by the Bristol Cafe in downtown Bellevue. It wasn't the cheapest place, but sometimes he allowed himself the luxury of a cup of good coffee and a slice of pie. The cafe was located on the ground floor of a modern business center, and its patrons were usually office workers, managers, and business people. Nigel felt awkward among these people in expensive suits and with confident expressions. His work uniform and worn jeans betrayed his social status. He ordered a latte and sat down at a table by the window, watching the people rushing by. That's when he saw her. She entered the cafe like a queen, confident, elegant, drawing the attention of everyone present. Her light hair was styled perfectly, her black dress accentuated her slender figure, and her high-heeled shoes clicked on the marble floor. She was carrying an expensive handbag and a tablet. Paris Grace. Although Nigel didn't know her name yet, he was already mesmerized. She walked up to the counter and ordered a cappuccino without sugar, speaking to the barista in a professional but slightly arrogant tone. Nigel noticed how she glanced around the cafe, assessing the atmosphere and the people. Her eyes lingered on him for a moment, and he felt himself blush. When all the tables were taken and Paris was standing with her tray, Nigel decided to take a desperate step. "Excuse me," he said, standing up. "Would you like to sit down? I can move over." She looked at him appraisingly. A flash of surprise crossed her eyes. She clearly hadn't expected such an offer from a man in work clothes. "Thank you," she replied after a pause. "That's very kind of you." Her voice was melodious, with a slight hint of sophistication. Paris sat down opposite him, placing her cup elegantly on the table. "I'm Nigel Thornton," he introduced himself, extending his hand. "Paris Grace," she replied, shaking his hand. Her skin was soft and well-groomed. "I work as a real estate agent at Prestige Real Estate." And then Nigel made a fatal mistake. Perhaps it was a desire to impress. Perhaps it was fear of appearing like a loser. Or maybe it was just a desperate desire to prolong the meeting. "I'm an investor," he lied, surprised at his own audacity. "I'm involved in real estate and startups." Paris's eyes lit up with new interest. "Really? That's interesting. There aren't many serious investors in Bellevue. What kind of projects are you involved in?" Nigel felt his heart racing. He had never been a good liar, but now the words flowed easily. "Mainly commercial real estate. I recently bought a few properties in the old downtown area to renovate. You know, gentrification is a lucrative business if you know where to look." He used terms he had heard on the news and read on the internet. To his surprise, it worked. "That's amazing. I specialize in commercial real estate. Maybe we could have lunch sometime and discuss opportunities for working together." "Sure," Nigel replied, unable to believe his luck. "Would tomorrow evening work for you?" Paris took an elegant business card out of her purse. "Here's my number. Call me tomorrow morning and we'll set up a meeting." When she left, Nigel sat for a long time, holding the gold-embossed business card in his hands. Paris Grace, senior real estate agent, Prestige Real Estate. He knew he had done something crazy, but for the first time in months, he felt alive. The rest of the day passed in a blur. At home, Nigel feverishly searched the internet for information about real estate, investments, and business. He read articles about gentrification, studied commercial property prices in Bellevue, and memorized professional terms. By evening, he had a plan. Tomorrow he would put on his only suit, bought 2 years ago for a job interview. He would rent a nice car for a day. It would cost almost his entire salary, but it was worth it. He would come up with a plausible story about his investments. "What am I doing?" he whispered, looking at his reflection in the mirror. But the image of Paris, her interested gaze and melodious voice made him cast aside his doubts. The next morning, Nigel called work and lied that he was sick. Ray was surprised. Nigel had hardly ever taken a sick day in 6 years. "Are you sure you're okay, buddy? You sound strange." "I'm fine, just a cold. I'll be in tomorrow." Then he drove to a car rental agency on the other side of town. There he rented a black Mercedes sedan for $250 a day. The salesperson looked at him suspiciously, but his deposit and driver's license were in order. In a suit and behind the wheel of an expensive car, Nigel felt like a different person. When he called Paris, his voice sounded more confident. "Paris? This is Nigel Thornton. We met yesterday at the cafe." "Oh, of course. How are your projects going?" "Great. Listen, how about we meet at Oliver's restaurant? I hear the food is excellent." Oliver's was the most expensive restaurant in Bellevue. Nigel had never been there, but he knew the restaurant's reputation. "Great idea. Would 7 o'clock be okay?" Nigel was nervous all day. He rehearsed what he would say in front of the mirror and thought about how he would answer possible questions. He studied the restaurant's menu online so he wouldn't look clueless. That evening, when he pulled up to the restaurant in his rented Mercedes, his heart was about to jump out of his chest. Paris was already waiting for him at the entrance in an elegant blue dress. She looked even more stunning than yesterday. "Nigel, what a beautiful car," she said, admiring the vehicle. "Thank you. I prefer classics," he replied, trying to sound casual. Dinner went better than he could have dreamed. Paris turned out to be an intelligent, ambitious, and charming conversationalist. She talked about her work, her clients, and her career plans. Nigel listened attentively, asked questions, and shared stories he had made up about his investments. "You know, Nigel, it's nice to meet a man with serious plans and ambitions," she said when dessert was served. "These days, so few people are willing to take risks and build something meaningful." "Life is too short for small goals," he replied, quoting a phrase he had read in a motivational article. When it came time to pay, the bill came to $380. Nigel tried not to show his shock. It was more than half his monthly salary, but he smiled and paid with his card, hoping he had enough money in his account. "Thank you for a wonderful evening," Paris said as he walked her to her car. "I'd love to see you again." "Of course, I'll call you tomorrow." When she drove away, Nigel got into his rental car and realized the magnitude of his problem. He had less than $50 left in his account, and it was 2 weeks until payday. But when he remembered Paris's admiring gaze and her words about how nice it was to meet an ambitious man, all his doubts faded away. As he returned the car to the dealership, he was already planning their next meeting. Somehow, he would find the money. He would take out a loan, ask Ray for an advance, sell something. The main thing was not to lose Paris now that he was so close to realizing his dream. At home, he stared at Paris's business card for a long time. Tomorrow he would have to go back to the warehouse, to the boxes and forklifts. But now he had a goal worth risking everything for. For the first time in his life, he felt that he could become something more than just a warehouse worker from Bellevue. Monday began with an alarming call from the bank. Nigel was standing by the coffee machine in the warehouse when his work uniform vibrated in his pocket. "Mr. Thornton, this is Bellevue Trust Bank. Your account is overdrawn following yesterday's transaction at the restaurant. You need to deposit funds within 3 days, or you will be charged an overdraft fee." Nigel closed his eyes. $47.30 was all he had left until payday in 10 days, and Paris was waiting for his call. "Hey, You look like a ghost, Ray said, approaching with a tablet in his hands. What happened? And where were you on Friday? Your cold went away quickly. Yeah, everything's fine, Nigel replied, hiding his phone. Just tired. Ray looked at his friend searchingly. In the 6 years they had known each other, he had learned to read Nigel's moods, and something was wrong now. Listen, if you're having money problems, I can lend you some until payday. It's not the first time. No thanks. Everything's really fine. But everything was not fine. Nigel had worked like a machine all day, thinking about how to get out of this situation. By evening, he had come up with a plan, a risky one, but the only one possible. After work, he drove to a bank on the other side of town where he had no history. There, he applied for a credit card, listing an inflated income and his job title as investment manager. The consultant, a young woman who looked tired, didn't even bother to check the details. Your credit limit will be $5,000, she said. The card will be ready in 3 days. 3 days. He had to figure out what to tell Paris in that time. He called her on Tuesday evening, sitting in his cramped apartment surrounded by piles of dirty dishes and old furniture. Paris, it's Nigel. How's it going? Oh, Nigel, I was just thinking about you. How are your investment projects going? Great, thanks. I'm just finishing up a deal with a commercial center. It's a very promising property. The lies came more easily now. How about we get together this weekend? Maybe we could go out of town somewhere? What a great idea. I know a great place, the Emerald Hills Country Club. It has a beautiful golf course and a spa. Nigel swallowed hard. Emerald Hills was an exclusive country club where membership cost tens of thousands of dollars a year. Sounds great, he replied. I'll book a table at the restaurant. After the conversation, he frantically searched for information about the club on the internet. The average bill at the restaurant was $300 for two, plus gas, parking, and tips. At least $400, which he didn't have. On Wednesday morning, an incident occurred at the warehouse that could ruin all of Nigel's plans. He was unloading a truck full of electronics when he heard a familiar voice. Nigel? Nigel Thornton? He turned around and saw Steve Morrison, his former classmate. Steve was a manager at one of Bellevue's large companies and was dressed in an expensive suit. Steve, hi, long time no see, Nigel said, instinctively trying to hide the warehouse company logo on his uniform. What are you doing here? Working? No, just checking a delivery for one of my projects. Nigel lied quickly. I bought this warehouse a month ago to convert it into an office center. Steve looked around the room in surprise. Really? You're an investor now? That's amazing. I thought you were still working here as a mover. Times are changing. Nigel smiled, feeling his palms sweat. Sorry, I have to run to a meeting with the architects. When Steve left, Ray approached Nigel with a puzzled look. What was that? You said you bought a warehouse? Nigel, what's going on? Nothing much, just didn't want to explain the whole situation to him. What situation? Ray's voice became serious. Man, I've known you for 6 years. You've never lied to me. What's going on? Nigel turned away, pretending to check the delivery note. Everything's fine, Ray. Just personal stuff. On Thursday, he got his credit card and immediately withdrew $1,000 in cash. The money burned a hole in his pocket, but for the first time in a week, he could breathe freely. Friday was spent in a feverish rush to prepare for the weekend. Nigel rented a car again, this time a Lexus SUV for $300 for 2 days. He bought a new shirt and pants at the mall, another $200 on his credit card. Saturday started perfectly. Paris greeted him in an elegant white dress and a wide-brimmed hat. She looked like a model from the cover of a luxury lifestyle magazine. Nigel, you look gorgeous, she exclaimed as she got into the car. Do you always drive such fancy cars? I have a small collection, he replied, trying to sound casual. Sometimes it's nice to change things up. The drive to Emerald Hills took an hour. Paris chatted about work, telling him about difficult clients and lucrative deals. Nigel listened intently, memorizing the details of her world, a world of successful people to which he desperately wanted to belong. You know, yesterday I showed a penthouse in the new Bellevue Towers complex, she said. $2,800,000. Can you imagine some people can afford that? Premium real estate has always been a good investment, Nigel replied. repeating a phrase from a financial magazine he had read the day before. The country club exceeded all his expectations. Perfectly manicured lawns, fountains, classic-style buildings. The parking lot was filled with expensive cars, Porsches, BMWs, Mercedes. Nigel parked his rented Lexus between a Tesla and a Jaguar, feeling like an imposter. "It's so beautiful here," Paris said as they walked to the restaurant. "I've wanted to come here for a long time, but I never had the right company." The club's restaurant was the epitome of elegance. Crystal chandeliers, snow-white tablecloths, waiters in white gloves. Nigel tried not to show his admiration and confusion. Over lunch, Paris talked about her childhood. She grew up in a poor family in the suburbs of Bellevue. Her father worked in a factory and her mother was a saleswoman in a grocery store. At 14, Paris vowed to herself that she would never live in poverty. "You know, Nigel, I've dreamed of financial stability my whole life," she said, carefully cutting her steak. "Money can't buy happiness, but it can buy freedom. The freedom to choose where to live, what to wear, who to associate with." "I understand," he replied, and it was true. He really understood her desire for a better life because he had felt the same way himself. "That's why I enjoy talking to you so much. You're an ambitious, successful man who knows the value of money and how to earn it. There aren't many like you in Bellevue." Nigel felt both pride and remorse. Paris was admiring a man who didn't exist. He was just a warehouse worker who spent money he didn't have to impress a woman who would never have looked at him twice if she knew the truth. After lunch, they took a walk around the club grounds. Paris took a few selfies in front of the golf course and posted them on social media. "A wonderful day with an amazing man," she wrote, in the caption of a photo of them standing arm in arm by the fountain. Nigel saw how quickly the likes and comments were piling up. Paris's friends wrote admiring messages. "What a hunk. Where did you find him? Is he rich?" On the way back, Paris was in high spirits. "Nigel, that was a wonderful day. It's been a long time since I felt so protected, being with a successful, reliable man." "I had a great time too," he replied, and that was also true. That evening, as he walked her home, Nigel saw where Paris lived. It was a modern residential complex in the prestigious Bellevue neighborhood. Security, underground parking, well-manicured grounds. "Would you like to come up for coffee?" she asked. Paris's apartment was stylish and expensive. Panoramic windows overlooking the city, designer furniture, paintings in expensive frames. Glossy magazines about real estate and investments lay on the coffee table. "You have excellent taste," Nigel said, looking around the interior. "Thanks. I saved up for a long time for this apartment, and for the furniture too, but it was worth it. Now I can entertain clients at home without feeling self-conscious about the decor." They sat on a leather sofa, drinking expensive coffee and talking about their plans for the future. Paris dreamed of opening her own real estate agency, working only with premium properties, and becoming one of the city's leading realtors. "What are your plans, Nigel? Where do you plan to expand?" He told her about non-existent projects, plans to invest in shopping centers and office complexes. The words flowed easily. He had read enough articles over the week to sound convincing. As he was about to leave, Paris kissed him. It wasn't a friendly kiss, but something more. In her eyes, he saw desire and hope. "Nigel, I'm so glad we met," she whispered. "I have a feeling you can change my life." On the way home, Nigel felt on top of the world. But when he returned the rental car and got on the bus to his neighborhood, reality hit him with double force. He had $3,000 left on his credit card. The bill for the weekend came to almost $1,200. On Sunday morning, his sister Sarah called him. "Nigel, I haven't heard your voice in a long time. How are you?" Sarah worked as a nurse at Bellevue Hospital and was the only person he had remained close to since his parents died. "Everything's fine. Working, living." "What about your personal life? Have you found someone special yet?" Nigel hesitated. He wanted to tell her about Paris, share his happiness, but how could he explain the situation to his sister? Maybe. It's too early to say. "Great. I was worried you were burying yourself in work. Let's get together this week. We can have dinner." "Sure, give me a call." After talking to his sister, Nigel sat in his cramped apartment for a long time, thinking about what was happening. He was standing on the edge of a precipice, but he couldn't stop himself. Paris expected him to live up to the image he had created. One wrong move, and everything would collapse. On Sunday evening, she sent him a message. "Thanks for a wonderful weekend. I look forward to seeing you again soon. Maybe we could go to the theater this week? There's a new premiere." Nigel looked at the ticket prices for the theater. $200 for 2 good seats, plus dinner after the show, a taxi, and his new suit for the theater. At least another $500. He replied, "Great idea. I'll buy the tickets tomorrow." The lie was becoming more complicated, more expensive, and more dangerous. But when he remembered Paris's kiss yesterday and her words that he could change her life, all his doubts faded away. Even if it meant ruining himself, he couldn't lose her now. The week began with an alarming letter from the bank. Nigel opened the envelope while sitting in the warehouse break room during his lunch break. The minimum payment on his credit card was $250 and was due within a week, and he still had to go to the theater with Paris on Friday. "Bad news?" asked Ray, sitting down next to him with a cup of coffee. "No, just some bank stuff," Nigel replied, hiding the letter. Over the past 2 weeks, Ray had noticed a change in his friend's behavior. Nigel had become distracted, often distracted by phone calls, and on Friday he had called in sick again. This morning he showed up at work with a new haircut and an obviously expensive watch on his wrist. "Nigel, we've been friends for years. What's going on? You're acting strange." "Nothing special. Just met a girl." Ray's face lit up. "Now that's news. Finally. Tell me about her." "Her name is Paris. She's a real estate agent. Smart, beautiful." Nigel fell silent, not knowing how to continue without revealing the truth. "And rich, judging by your new watch." Nigel instinctively covered his wrist with his hand. He had bought the watch yesterday for $300 on his credit card, knowing that Paris would definitely notice cheap accessories. "No, I got a bonus for last month." "What bonus?" "Nigel, we don't have a bonus system at our warehouse." An awkward pause ensued. Nigel felt his face flush. "Okay, it's hard to explain. Just trust me, okay?" Ray wanted to continue questioning him, but then the work phone rang. A truck had arrived with another shipment of goods. That evening, Nigel met Paris at a cafe in the city center. She looked tired after a day at work, but still elegant in her gray business suit. "How's the investment going?" she asked, ordering a cappuccino. "Great. I'm closing a deal with a shopping center on the outskirts of town this week. I'm going to completely renovate it." "How much are you investing?" "About $2 million, Nigel lied, quoting a figure he had heard in the news about similar projects. Paris's eyes lit up. $2 million? Nigel, that's serious money. You're really playing in the big leagues. You have to take risks to make a decent profit." She leaned closer, lowering her voice. "And you know what? I have information about an interesting property. The owner of an old office building in the center wants to sell it quickly and cheaply. He's moving to another state. If you're interested..." Nigel felt panic rising. Paris was offering him a real deal, and he couldn't even pay for coffee without a credit card. "That's interesting, but all my funds are tied up in current projects right now, maybe in a month or two." "Of course, I understand. Serious investors don't let their money sit around." After the cafe, they went shopping. Paris wanted to buy a new dress for the theater, and Nigel was nervous that she would ask him to pay for it. Fortunately, she paid for it herself, but on the way to the theater box office, she stopped at a jewelry store window. "Look at those beautiful earrings," she said, pointing to a pair of diamond earrings that cost $3,000. "I dream of being able to afford them someday." "They are really beautiful," Nigel agreed, feeling his stomach tighten with anxiety. At the theater box office, tickets for the premiere were even more expensive than he had expected. $280 for 2 seats in the orchestra section. Nigel paid with his credit card, trying to look casual. On Thursday, an incident occurred that could ruin all of Nigel's plans. He was unloading pallets in the far corner of the warehouse when he heard familiar voices at the entrance. Turning around, he saw Paris accompanied by an elderly man in an expensive suit. "Yes, this is one of the largest warehouse complexes in Bellevue," she said. "The owner is considering selling it for redevelopment as a shopping center." Nigel realized that Paris had brought a potential buyer on a tour. She didn't know he worked here and could see him now. Quickly hiding behind a tall rack, he watched them walk through the warehouse. Paris showed them the layout and explained the advantages of the location. Nigel moved quietly alongside, hiding behind boxes and equipment. "Interesting property," said the older man. "Who's the current owner?" "Bellevue Logistics. I can arrange a meeting with management next week." Nigel stood 10 meters away, pressed against the wall and praying he wouldn't be noticed. If Paris saw him here in his work clothes, everything would be ruined. Fortunately, the tour was short. 20 minutes later, they left, and Nigel stayed behind, wiping the cold sweat from his forehead. "What are you doing there?" Ray asked, appearing from around the corner. "Playing hide and seek?" "No, just checking the inventory in the back rows." "Who was that woman with the client?" "She was pretty. From a real estate agency, judging by their conversation." Nigel's heart began to race. "I don't know. I didn't hear them talking." Ray looked at his friend intently. "Nigel, you're lying, and not for the first time in the last few weeks. What's going on?" "Nothing's going on." "Then explain the expensive watch, the new haircut, and the fact that you've called in sick twice in a month. You've only called in sick 3 times in 6 years. Nigel realized he couldn't dodge the questions any longer. "Okay, I'm seeing a girl, an expensive girl. I want to impress her." "And you're spending money you don't have on her?" "I have money." "What money?" "Nigel, I know how much you make. That watch alone is half a month's salary for you." The tension was mounting. Nigel felt he was about to snap. "It's none of your business, Ray. It is my business because you're my friend, and I don't want to see you ruin your life for some woman." "She's not some woman. You don't know her." "Do you know her?" "Nigel, think about it. If all she wants is your money, what kind of relationship is that?" "It's not about the money." "Then tell her the truth. Tell her who you really are. If she really loves you, it won't matter." Nigel fell silent. He couldn't tell Ray that he had already lied to Paris about his status, that she thought he was a successful investor. Friday, the day of the theater outing, began disastrously. Nigel overslept in the morning and was half an hour late for work. Ray greeted him coldly. "I hope your princess appreciates your sacrifices," he said sarcastically. At lunchtime, Nigel went to the bank to make the minimum payment on his credit card. But when he tried to withdraw cash from another card, the ATM displayed the message, "Insufficient funds." He checked his balance, $17.40, 5 days until payday. In desperation, he called the bank and asked for a credit limit increase. "Mr. Thornton, your credit history does not allow us to increase your limit at this time. You can reapply in 3 months." He had less than $1,000 of available credit left. And tonight, the theater, dinner, a taxi, at least $400. Nigel sat in his car in the bank parking lot and for the first time in a month, took an honest look at his situation. Based on his salary, he had already spent 3 months' worth of money. His debts were growing and his income remained the same. Sooner or later, the house of cards would collapse. But then he imagined Paris's face if he canceled the theater. Her disappointment, questions, suspicions. No, he couldn't back out today. He met Paris at the theater that evening. She was stunning in a new black dress with flawless makeup and hair. "Nigel, how's your deal going? The shopping center?" "Everything's going according to plan. We're signing the final documents tomorrow." The performance was good, but Nigel couldn't concentrate on the action. He counted the money left on his card, planned the next week, and thought about how to get out of this situation. After the theater, Paris suggested dinner at a new expensive restaurant. "They say the food is amazing, and the interior was designed by the same person who worked on Emerald Hills." Nigel couldn't refuse without arousing suspicion. At the restaurant, Paris was in high spirits. She told him about her plans to open her own real estate agency. "You know, Nigel, meeting you has changed my life. Being with a successful, confident man makes me feel like I can achieve anything." "You can achieve anything you want," he replied, and there was sincerity in his words. "And I was thinking, maybe we could become not just personal partners, but business partners as well. I know the Bellevue real estate market better than anyone, and you have the capital to invest." Nigel felt the ground slip away from under his feet. That's an interesting idea, but I need some time to think about it. Of course! I'm in no rush. It's just that when two ambitious people join forces, the results can be amazing. The restaurant bill came to $420. His available credit was reduced to $450. On the way home, Paris was tender and grateful. Thank you for a wonderful evening. You know how to make a woman happy. As he kissed her goodbye, Nigel felt both happy and panicked. He loved this woman, but she loved a man who didn't exist. At home, he sat down at his computer and began feverishly searching for ways to make quick money. Loans, credits, side jobs, but all the options took time or involved huge risks. On Saturday morning, his sister Sarah called. Nigel, we agreed to have dinner this week. Did you forget? Sorry, Sarah, I'm really busy at work. At the warehouse? What could be so busy there? Another lie was about to slip out, but he stopped himself. Just a lot of work. Can we do it next week? Sure, but Nigel, you sound strange. Is everything okay? Everything's fine, but nothing was fine. Nigel was standing on the edge of a precipice, and every day brought him closer to falling. And Paris had no idea that she was dating a man who lied to her every day and lived on borrowed money to maintain the illusion of success. On Sunday, she sent him a message. I've been thinking about our conversation about partnership. I have a few ideas. Maybe we can meet during the week and discuss the details. Nigel stared at his phone screen for a long time, not knowing how to respond. The game had gone too far, but stopping meant losing Paris forever. Monday began with a disaster. Nigel woke up to the insistent ringing of the doorbell. A courier was standing at the door with a registered letter from the bank. Mr. Thornton, please sign here. The letter contained a notice of late payment on his credit card. The penalty was $100, and the interest rate had increased to 29% per annum. His available credit limit had been reduced to $350. Another unpleasant surprise awaited him at work. Ray called him into his office and closed the door. Nigel, I need to have a serious talk with you. Your neighbor, Mr. Cohen, called yesterday. He asked if I knew where you were. He said you owe him 3 months' rent for the garage. Nigel had forgotten about the garage he rented to store old things. He hadn't paid in 4 months. It's a misunderstanding. I'll take care of it. Nigel, stop lying. I can see what's going on. You're in debt up to your ears because of some woman. This is crazy. You don't understand. I understand more than you think. If you don't stop now, it'll end badly. On Wednesday, Paris called with a proposal to meet to discuss a business partnership. I have some specific projects that might interest us. Come to my place at 7 in the evening. I'll make dinner, and we can discuss everything calmly. Nigel knew he couldn't avoid talking about money and investments any longer, but he couldn't admit to the deception either. In the evening, he took a taxi to Paris's place. He didn't have enough money to rent a car. She greeted him in a dress, elegant but more casual than usual. Nigel, come in. I'm so glad you could make it. I made your favorite dish. The apartment was decorated with candles, and the table was set with expensive dishes and a bottle of champagne. The atmosphere was romantic, but Nigel felt only anxiety. Paris, this looks amazing, but no buts. Today we are celebrating the beginning of our partnership. During dinner, she took out a folder with documents. I've prepared a business plan. The first project is an old office building in the center that I told you about. The owner agreed to sell it for $1.5 million. After renovation, it can be sold for $3 million. The net profit is $1,200,000. Nigel leafed through the documents, not understanding half the terms. Sounds interesting, but I need time to study all the details. Of course, but the owner is in a hurry. He needs a decision by the end of the week. If we miss this opportunity, our competitors will snatch it up. Paris leaned closer, her eyes burning with enthusiasm. Nigel, this is our chance. Your money plus my market knowledge will become one of the leading investment companies in Bellevue. Paris, I have to tell you something. Is something wrong? Concern flashed in her eyes. No, it's just a serious decision. $1.5 million is a lot of money. For the average person, yes, but not for you. You have the means, don't you? Nigel felt his palms sweat. Of course I do. We just need to calculate everything correctly. Paris smiled and kissed him. I'm so happy we're together. You have no idea how long I've dreamed of meeting a man with whom I could make serious plans. After dinner, they moved to the living room. Paris turned on some relaxing music and opened another bottle of wine. Now tell me about your current projects. How's that shopping center coming along? Everything's going according to plan, Nigel replied automatically. How much are you investing? I could help with the paperwork. 2 million, as I said. Which bank? Maybe we could use the same credit lines for our project. Nigel hesitated. He didn't know the names of banks that would lend such large sums. It's private financing, through some investor friends. Interesting. Can you show me the documents? I'm curious to see how these deals are structured. The documents are at home, in the safe. Paris looked at him intently. Nigel, you seem tense today. Is something bothering you? No, everything's fine. I'm just tired. She sat down next to him on the sofa and put her hand on his shoulder. We trust each other, don't we? If there's a problem, you can tell me. There are no problems. Then why can't you give me straight answers about money? Nigel, we're planning to become partners. I need to know the details of your financial situation. The pressure was mounting. Nigel felt the walls closing in around him. Paris, you have to understand, in business, it's not customary to reveal all your cards at once. But I'm not a stranger. I'm your girlfriend. Yes, but what? Paris's voice grew colder. Nigel, I've been planning our future for 3 weeks. I've told all my friends and colleagues about you. I've already spent the profits from our joint projects in my head. And now you tell me, but? That's not what I meant. Paris stood up and began pacing the room. What did you mean? Is it just me, or are you hiding something? I'm not hiding anything. Then prove it. Tomorrow we're going to your bank, and you're going to show me your income statement and bank statements. Nigel turned pale. Paris, that's unreasonable. Unreasonable? Her voice rose. It's unreasonable to demand honesty from a man I'm planning to spend my life with? This isn't about honesty. Then what is it? Nigel was silent, not knowing what to say. Paris stopped in front of him, crossing her arms over her chest. Nigel, answer me straight. Do you have the money for the investment or not? There was a long pause. The sound of his own heartbeat was deafening. Yes, he whispered. How much? Enough. How much? Paris shouted. Nigel flinched at her tone. Paris, calm down. I'm calm. I just want a straight answer to a simple question. She grabbed her phone. You know what? I'll find out myself. I have connections at the banks. Tomorrow, I'll find out the truth about your financial situation. Paris, don't. Why? What are you hiding? Nigel knew the game was over. Tomorrow, she would find out the truth, and everything would fall apart. It was better to confess now. Okay, he said quietly. You're right. I'm hiding something. Paris turned to him, her eyes full of expectation. I don't have any money to invest. The silence lasted forever. What did you say? I don't have any money. I'm not an investor. I work in a warehouse. I make $2,000 a month. Paris's face slowly changed from confusion to understanding, from understanding to anger. What? I work as a loader at Bellevue Logistics. The day we met, I came to the cafe after my shift. No. Paris took a step back. That's impossible. I fell in love with you at first sight. I wanted to impress you. I lied about the investment. The shopping center? The renovation? I made it up. The cars? The expensive restaurants? It's all on credit. I owe the banks almost $5,000. Paris sank into a chair as if she had been knocked down. So all this time, all our dates, plans, and conversations about the future were a lie? Not everything. My feelings for you are real. Feelings? She laughed hysterically. What the hell feelings? You've been deceiving me for a month. Paris, I can explain everything. Explain what? How you made a fool of me? How you made me believe in a fairy tale? She jumped up and began pacing nervously around the room. My God, what have I done? I told everyone about you, my colleagues, my friends, even my clients. I bragged that I had met a successful investor. Paris, please calm down. Calm down? She turned to him. Do you realize what you've done? I had plans. I had already opened my agency in my mind. I thought I had finally found a man who could give me stability. Tears streamed down her cheeks, smearing her mascara. I've struggled with poverty my whole life. I've dreamed of financial security my whole life. And when I thought I had found it, it turned out to be another deception. I didn't want to hurt you. You didn't want to? She grabbed a heavy crystal vase from the table. You ruined my life, all my plans, all my dreams. Paris, put the vase down. I hate you. I hate you for making me believe a lie. She swung the vase at him. Nigel raised his arms to defend himself. Paris, stop! You stole my hope. The vase crashed down on Nigel's head with terrifying force. There was a crack. He fell to his knees, blood streaming down his face. Paris, he croaked, but she was beside herself with rage. She grabbed a heavy metal statuette from the shelf. You liar! You ruined my life! The second blow landed on his temple. Nigel collapsed to the floor. I hate you! I hate you! The third blow. The fourth. Blood splattered across the white carpet. Only when Nigel stopped moving did Paris lower the statuette. Silence filled the apartment. She stood over the motionless body, breathing heavily. Oh my God, what have I done? Reality hit her like a bucket of ice water. Nigel lay in a pool of blood, his eyes wide open but empty. Paris screamed. The next hour passed in a blur. She washed her hands, changed her clothes, and gathered her things in a bag. Her brain was working automatically in survival mode. She left the apartment at 2 a.m. when the hallways were empty. She drove to her own home, took a shower, and burned her blood-stained clothes in the fireplace. By morning, she was already rehearsing her alibi. Detective James Collins received a call on Thursday at 9:30 a.m. The body was discovered by a neighbor who came to deliver the mail and noticed that Nigel's apartment door was ajar. What do we have? He asked Officer Martinez, the first to arrive at the scene. Nigel Thornton, 32 years old, multiple head injuries from a blunt object. Neighbors say they heard screams last night but thought someone was watching TV. Collins examined the crime scene. Signs of a struggle, a broken vase, blood on a statue. Clearly a crime of passion. Any witnesses? A neighbor saw a woman come to Thornton's apartment last night. Blonde, elegantly dressed, around 7 p.m. When did she leave? No one saw her. Collins found a business card in the apartment. Paris Grace. Senior real estate agent, Prestige Real Estate. Let's start with her. Detective James Collins arrived at the Prestige Real Estate office at 10 a.m. A 45-year-old police officer with 20 years of experience, he had seen many crimes, but cases involving deception always intrigued him. Paris Grace sat at her desk, talking on the phone with a client. She looked impeccable. Her hair was neatly styled, her makeup was professional, and she wore a business suit. Only Collins noticed the slight tremor in her hands and the overly bright blush on her cheeks. Miss Grace, Detective Collins, Bellevue Police. I need to ask you a few questions. She ended the call and turned to him with a professional smile. Of course, Detective. What's the matter? Are you familiar with Nigel Thornton? A slight pause. Collins noticed her face tense. Yes, we met. What happened? Mr. Thornton is dead. He was killed last night in his apartment. Paris gasped, pressing her hand to her chest. Oh my God, that's terrible. How did it happen? That's what I'm trying to find out. When was the last time you saw him? Last week. We had dinner at a restaurant. And where were you last night? At home, working on some paperwork, preparing a presentation for clients. Can anyone confirm that? No, I live alone. Why do you ask? Collins took out his notebook. Witnesses saw a blonde woman visiting Mr. Thornton around 7 o'clock last night. The description matches yours. It couldn't have been me. I told you I was at home. The detective studied her face intently. 20 years on the job had taught him how to read people. Miss Grace, what was your relationship with Mr. Thornton? We dated for a month. Nothing serious. Neighbors say they heard screams coming from his apartment last night. A woman's voice. Paris paled beneath her layer of foundation. Detective, I understand you're doing your job, but I had nothing to do with Nigel's death. Then you won't mind if we check your car? Sometimes traces can be found on it. Of course, go ahead. An hour later, Collins received a call from the forensic technician. James, There are microparticles of blood in the trunk of her car. They match the victim's blood type. We also found burnt remains of clothing in the fireplace of her apartment. The detective returned to the agency with an arrest warrant. Paris was in a meeting with clients when he entered. "Miss Grace, you need to come with us." She apologized to her clients and stepped out into the hallway. "What's going on?" "You're under arrest on suspicion of the murder of Nigel Thornton." Paris's face contorted. "This is absurd. You have no evidence. The blood in your car and the burned clothes are sufficient evidence for an arrest." Collins read her rights. Her colleagues from the agency watched in shock as their successful employee was handcuffed. At the police station, Paris demanded a lawyer, but after 2 hours of waiting, she lost her composure. "Okay," she said to Collins. "I'll tell you the truth, but it was self-defense." The detective turned on the tape recorder. "I went to Nigel's house last night to discuss a business proposal. We were planning to become partners in an investment business. And what happened? He admitted that he had been cheating on me. He had been lying about his financial situation all along. It turned out he was just a lowly warehouse worker with no money." Paris's voice trembled with emotion. "I spent a month making plans for our future together. I told all my colleagues about my wealthy boyfriend, and he turned out to be a liar. And that's why you killed him?" "I didn't plan it. When he confessed, I flew into a rage. I grabbed a vase to scare him, but he tried to take it away and we started fighting. Witnesses report multiple head injuries." Paris fell silent, realizing that her story didn't hold up. "Miss Grace, let's be honest. You found out the truth about Nigel and killed him in a fit of rage." A long pause. Then Paris nodded. "Yes, I killed him. But you don't understand what he did to me. He ruined all my plans, all my dreams." Tears streamed down her cheeks. "I've struggled with poverty my whole life. When I met Nigel, I thought I'd finally found financial stability, but he turned out to be just as much of a loser as my father. That doesn't justify murder." "I know, but in that moment, I was beside myself. He stole my hope for a better life." An hour later, Collins went to the Bellevue logistics warehouse to talk to Nigel's co-workers. Ray Parker met him in his office. "Detective, this is a terrible tragedy. Nigel was a good guy. Tell me about his last few weeks. Did you notice anything unusual?" Ray sighed heavily. "He changed a month ago. He became secretive and was spending money he didn't have. I tried to talk to him, but he wouldn't listen." "Did he mention a girlfriend?" "Just her name, Paris. He said she was a real estate agent. I knew he was trying to impress her, but I didn't think it would go this far." "How far?" "He got into debt. He took out loans and rented expensive cars. He lied to her and said he was a wealthy investor." Collins wrote down the statement. "How was he acting in the last few days?" "He was nervous, scared. He knew everything could fall apart. I warned him that lying would end badly." The detective also spoke with Nigel's sister, Sarah Thornton. The 35-year-old nurse was crying in the police office. "I knew he was seeing someone, but he didn't give me any details. He sounded strange on the phone in recent weeks, sometimes excited, sometimes depressed." "Did he mention any financial problems?" "No, but I noticed he was spending more than usual. New clothes, expensive restaurants. I thought he had found an additional source of income." A week later, the case went to trial. Paris's lawyer tried to prove that the murder was committed in the heat of passion, but the evidence spoke against this version. "Your Honor," said the prosecutor, addressing the jury, "the defendant committed a brutal murder for selfish reasons. When she learned that the victim could not provide her with the lifestyle she desired, she killed him in a fit of rage." The defense attorney objected. "My client was the victim of a cruel deception. She was led on for a month, forced to make plans based on false foundations. It was a single emotional outburst by a woman whose life had been destroyed by lies." Witnesses testified about the character of both parties. Nigel's colleagues described him as a kind but insecure man. Paris's colleagues spoke of her ambition and obsession with financial success. "She always said she would never be poor," her friend said. For Paris, money meant security. When she talked about Nigel, her eyes lit up. She had finally found a man who could provide for her. Ray Parker testified about the last weeks of Nigel's life. "He was in love and willing to do anything for this woman. He spent money he didn't have. I warned him it would end badly, but I didn't think it would be this bad. Paris herself testified in her own defense. I didn't plan to kill him. It's just that when I found out the truth, my world fell apart. All my plans, all my dreams were built on a lie. I don't remember picking up the statuette. All I remember is rage and pain. But you struck him multiple times, the prosecutor pointed out. I was out of my mind. He stole my hope for a better life. The trial lasted 3 weeks. The jury deliberated for 2 days. The verdict: guilty of second-degree murder. The judge sentenced Paris Grace to 25 years in prison. Your motives are understandable, he said, but nothing justifies taking a human life. Nigel Thornton may have deceived you, but his crime was lying, and yours was murder. After the sentence was handed down, Paris sat in the courtroom, staring into space. Her dreams of financial stability and a successful career had turned into a prison cell and a lifelong stigma as a murderer. Detective Collins closed the case, but the story of Nigel and Paris remained in his memory as a reminder of how lies and despair can lead to tragedy. Only Nigel's sister, a few colleagues, and Ray Parker attended the funeral. He was a good man, Ray said at the wake. He just wanted to be something more than he was. Is that a crime? Sarah Thornton cried over her brother's coffin. I'm sorry, Nigel. I should have been closer to you. I should have helped you. A month after the trial, Detective Collins met Ray at the same cafe where Nigel had first seen Paris. You know, Detective, Ray said, sometimes I wonder what would have happened if he had just told the truth from the start. She wouldn't have gone out with him, Collins replied. But he'd be alive. They stared silently out the window at the street, where people hurried along with their secrets, dreams, and illusions. The story of Nigel Thornton and Paris Grace became a warning about how lies born of a desire to love and be loved can turn into tragedy for everyone involved. In her prison cell, Paris often thought about the night when everything changed. If only she had been able to control her anger. If only she had given herself time to cool down and think. But the past cannot be changed. Now she would have to spend the best years of her life behind bars, reflecting on the price of deception and revenge.